Welcome back to 360 Sports Network. This is our NFL Free Agency Show. I am Greg, the mad scientist, Fischero, and with me tonight is James, the Value Man Dotson. James, how are you out there?
Hey, we're doing well here. It's that time of year. NFL has already come and gone and is back yet again. We're going to be going over with the NFL draft very soon, but there's something that comes before the draft itself, and that's this free agency stuff. We really need to dissect who's made the big moves to figure out what they're going to do in the draft.
You know, I just love that smell of desperation in the air, and that smell of desperation comes from general managers wanting to improve their teams exponentially. If that's a word. But anyway.
I believe you were saying exponentially. Let me help you as a math guy.
There we go. A little bit of too much caffeine on the palate here. But anyway, exponentially. And one way to do that is, of course, shell out the big bucks and damn the salary cap, and let's go after the players that can make your team the Super Bowl winning team for...
Well, and why don't we start with the Super Bowl winning team?
Yes.
The Baltimore Ravens, who go and sign their guy. They went and paid the big bucks, literally the most bucks ever, the highest paying position in NFL history. Joe Flacco getting a 6-year, $120 million deal. What do you think about this one, Greg?
It was a stupid move. It really was. Now, granted, Joe Flacco is a good quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. He had a nice run. He does well in the playoffs. He is basically what you would call a good playoff player. But in the regular season, he's pedestrian at best. And for him to have those high bucks compared to somebody like a Drew Brees, or compared to somebody like, there's a really good quarterback up there in Green Bay who's going for a deal right now too. He's not at that level. And I think Joe Flacco did more harm to his team than good by doing this.
I agree, because you had to let go of players like an Anquan Bolden. You had to let go of some of the role players on defense who just could not be paid. I mean, you're going to lose some anyway after winning the Super Bowl, but you need to have the weapons around you. You would think that someone like Anquan Bolden would know that. You know that the real power play guys out there, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, they understand it. That's why they've taken pay cuts and they renegotiate their contracts to make it so that they can keep those role players who are helping them. Guys like the Wes Welkers of the world. And we'll get into him in a moment. But that sort of thing is something that you see the real superstars, the guys who deserve these $120 million deals, they're the ones who take the pay cuts. I agree. I think this is a terrible move by Baltimore, a terrible move by Flacco. I don't care. Yes, you're a great playoff quarterback. Good for you. You've done it over the last few years. Great. You've shown me no consistency though ever. So I don't know how that warrants $120 million. But hey, I'm not the one writing the check.
I think this move could actually come back and haunt Joe Flacco. Not perhaps this year, but probably next year or the year after, when things start to fall apart in Baltimore. And then they'll be looking at Joe Flacco's inconsistency, because I've argued this on WBBW many times with Ryan and Ellis. It's not the quarterback that made Joe Flacco. It's his receivers. And he had some great receivers out there that basically plucked the ball and held on to that thing and made the plays happen. Now, granted, Flacco was half of the play. The receivers are the other half of the play. But without his star core group of receivers, he's not going to be anywhere near the player that he was when he won the Super Bowl.
And I agree. Now, why are we such the minority here, Greg?
I don't know. I don't think we are, to be honest with you.
Well, all I ever hear is, how he's signed this great deal and what a great play getting this elite quarterback. I mean, that's all I ever hear. So I don't know. I don't think he is, and that's another story for another day. And I think you might be right that in a year from now we're going to be pointing back to this podcast and saying, "Look, we've told you so." But it is what it is. But let's not make this the Joe Flacco show. What other great free agents have been re-signed or have signed to a new contract at a new place that we should be keeping our eyes on?
Well, one of the ones that I'm really kind of impressed about is Ed Reed. I always liked Ed Reed. I would have loved to see Ed Reed go to the Steelers, but he went to the Houston Texans. And Ed Reed, of course, is going to definitely bolster an already stout defense over there in Houston. But in response to the Ed Reed situation, with Ed Reed moving on, Baltimore pulled, I believe, one of the biggest coup d'etats out there by signing Elvis, I'm not appreciated in Denver anymore, Dumerville. And that, to me, I think the Elvis Dumerville signing as a defensive end out there is tremendous. That's just huge, because this guy is a beast out there, and he will definitely help bolster that defense.
Yeah, I mean, you lose Ray Lewis, you lose everybody else, you lose Ed Reed. You needed something to come back upon, and especially when you know you're going to lose some players, like we mentioned, because of Joe Flacco. I agree. The whole Dumerville thing with what happened in Denver, it's done. But he found a new home. That's the reason why Baltimore could make a run at a back-to-back Super Bowl championship. Not because of Joe Flacco's signing, but because of an Elvis Dumerville re-signing, and that's what's kind of scary there in my mind.
Yeah, but on the same token, Baltimore still has to put up some points on the board, and offensively, they're kind of depleted right now.
That's true. Now, here's another name. Aqib Talib just got signed with New England, a one-year, $6 million deal. Someone who was, a big name and then has fallen off the radar. You've seen New England do this before, a la Randy Moss. Do you see Talib pulling a Randy Moss?
No, I don't. Actually, I really like Aqib Talib. I really liked him whenever he played for Kansas under Mr. Mangino. Mr. Mangino, this is the type of player that needs a special type of coach. Mangino had Aqib Talib's number, and that's why Aqib Talib did well when he was in Kansas. Aqib Talib fell apart in when he was, I believe it was in Tampa Bay, wasn't he?
Yes.
He fell apart down there because they did not have that strong type of coach that Belichick seems to be. I see Talib actually thriving in the New England system and possibly signing another 2 or 3 year deal after this year. This is definitely a guy that can fit into the mold, and is definitely, he's got his behaviors under control, and I think he's on the right path here, to be honest with you. I really like that signing for New England.
Well, and like I said, they've done it before. They did very similar. I mean, everything you're saying, I thought you were talking about Randy Moss. I could have easily mistaken that as talking about Randy Moss, and look how that worked out for them.
And once again, it takes a special type of coach to deal with that type of player. And, of course, these coaches are controversial. They're not well-liked in the community. They tend to be unattractive, either wearing Sherpas or being 200 pounds overweight because they have issues themselves. But you know what? They win. And that's what Mangino did when he was in Kansas, and that's what Bill Belichick does. They win.
Exactly. And, a couple other, just real quickly, Jim Leonard, a couple other notable names. Jim Leonard signed a one-year deal with Indianapolis. I mean, he's a role player guy that always seems to get his name in things. Nnamdi Asomugha on defense signs with San Francisco, so that's going to really bolster their defense. San Francisco has made a number of off-season moves here that are just going to make them, in my mind, I think they're the front runner to repeat as the NFC representative in the Super Bowl.
Oh, no doubt about it. Let's talk about some of those moves.
Well, I mean, we'll talk in trades before. I mean, we know that they got Anquan Boldin in the trade, the Harbaugh trade. I guess we can start talking about that as well. They have just, everything that they've had, they really haven't lost anybody. They lost their second-string tight end, Delaney Walker. Oh, well, they still have Vernon Davis. And they pick up guys like in the trade, Anquan Boldin. They get help in the secondary with Nnamdi Asomugha. I mean, you tell me, where is there a weak spot right now on this San Francisco team?
You know what? If there is a weak spot out there, it's really not obvious. They've got all their bases covered, and they do it quite well. Nnamdi Asomugha, perhaps he didn't quite fit in. He was probably a bit overrated, but in the right system with the right coach. And we've seen that time and time again with Harbaugh out there in San Francisco. He makes these players work.
Absolutely he does. And it's worked. He's been there, what, 2 years now, 3 years, and he's done already what he's done. So I'm excited for him. I mean, Glenn Dorsey's been re-signed as well. This, all things are looking up. I think the only team that maybe will give him a threat would be Seattle. And, I mean, they've made some moves. They're looking good with Russell Wilson. A couple other big names we want to look at here. How about some names that have not been signed yet? I mean, guys like Richard Seymour pop on the list. Guys like James Harrison on the list. How are guys like this not being signed yet, Greg?
Yeah, well, guys like, of course, James Harrison, Ahmad Bradshaw, big name, hasn't been signed yet. Sean Phillips, your star linebacker out of San Diego. I think what's happened here is there are a lot of teams that are in salary cap trouble. And do you really want to invest that much money to bring a player on that's just past the high point of their career and is starting on the downslope of their career? These are players that are prone to get injured from time to time. And I think that's why you haven't seen, Harrison get signed by anybody. He's starting on the downside of his carear. And
I'm sure behavior isn't going to help his cause either.
Well, you know what? Harrison's behavior is extremely overblown. All right, this is a guy that plays old school football. This is not a guy who's a thug. This is a guy that basically has done everything that he's been told to do by the best coaches in the country. And you know what? If this were the 1970s instead of the year 2013, his play would have been lauded. This is an old school player. But what's holding him back is not so much his behavior problems, because this guy will do anything that he's told to do. No doubt about it. This is a player that's a bit injury prone, and as we saw last year, has lost maybe a half step.
Greg, I think I just heard Roger Goodell call. I think he's going to fine you for saying anything positive about James Harrison.
On the line right now. I want to debate Roger Goodell. I've been wanting Roger Goodell on our show forever because I've got a bone to pick with Mr. Goodell.
We have a few too many bones to pick with him. But, I mean, look, you mentioned a good point, though, about being on the tail end of a career. One of the guys who really sticks out, another one who has not been signed yet, Michael Turner. Atlanta lets him go. They go right in and pick up a younger back, a much, in my mind, more talented back in Steven Jackson. So he's going to go there. He's got a 3-year deal with them. So I think you see teams like that. I mean, we look with Wes Welker getting signed to Denver, and immediately New England counters by going and picking up Danny Amendola. So teams are willing to give up the older guy to get someone very comparable who's a few years younger.
You know what? Let's talk about 3 receivers. You already mentioned one, Wes Welker. We're going to mention Wes Welker, Mike Wallace, and Greg Jennings. 3 significant signings. 3 significant teams. I really, really like the Wes Welker signing in Denver. I think that, to me, is probably the primo, foremost, best signing that a team has done all year with free agency.
Oh, one of the best signings in many years, in my mind, to be quite honest. I mean, Wes Welker, some people say it's the system, it's the way that Tom Brady plays or whatever. You might be right, but it takes talent to be able to get open in that underneath game 120 times in a season, plus however many times that he was missed on routes or somebody else is open downfield. You know how that works. But there's one other quarterback in the league besides Tom Brady who will take what the defense gives you, period. Nothing more, nothing less. That's Peyton Manning. I mean, think about what he has done over the years with guys by the name of like Dallas Clark. I mean, we saw it this year. We were waiting for tight ends like Joel Dreesen to go and step up. And you know what? Some of them had games like that. Jacob Tamme had games like that. But you saw it was the Eric Decker type players, a slot receiver, like we've seen before with, say, Brandon Stokely back in Indianapolis. Those are the ones who have been great under the influence of Peyton Manning. Now you're bringing in the greatest slot receiver, without a doubt, in NFL history. Oh, my goodness, this is scary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a guy that continuously makes plays. I mean, if you compare him to Hines Ward in Hines Ward's prime, this guy still hadn't showed us above Hines Ward.
Oh, absolutely. And again, you got to worry about he is getting a little bit older in the tooth. But guess what? I bet you'll still see him probably returning some punts throughout the year. He's going to get the job done. He's going to get over 100 catches like he always does. I mean, Peyton Manning finds the open receiver. Wes Welker gets open. Therefore, Wes Welker's going to get lots of catches. And we're seeing it already. They've already clicked. Peyton Manning has come out and said he's never connected so quickly with a receiver before.
Yeah, that's significant. Let's talk a little bit about Greg Jennings, going from the Green Bay system to the Minnesota system. Same division. Almost like a Brett Favre-style move. What are your thoughts on that one?
You know, I'm not as stoked about this, and I can't figure out why. I like Greg Jennings. I think he's a good receiver. Maybe I'm worried about who it would be that's throwing in the ball, because Christian Ponder still has not been a great, big, impressive for me. So maybe that scares me. Maybe the fact that it's a 5-year deal scares me. I'm not sure, but just something kind of... I'm unsure for some reason.
Well, the way I look at it, it's sort of like the Baltimore phenomenon with Joe Flacco and all of his great receivers that he had. You know, when you have an Anquan Bolden out there catching the ball when Joe Flacco throws it, it makes Joe Flacco look pretty darn good. Christian Ponder is kind of a pedestrian quarterback at this particular time frame. But who did he have out there catching the ball? Well, he had Percy Harvin, but then who else?
Exactly, and Percy Harvin isn't exactly your prototypical receiver. He is, I mean, you can almost call him a slot receiver, a slash-type guy. He'll get plays in the backfield, and that's why, again, him going to Seattle is absolutely huge for Seattle fitting that system, and Greg Jennings is pretty much the immediate response, like, okay, this is what we're going to do now. And maybe that'll help a Christian Ponder to be able to get a more pure receiver.
I really think so. I really think so. And, yeah, Christian Ponder is more of a pure drop-back type quarterback, too.
Exactly.
So,
and then you mentioned Mike Wallace going down to Miami. Again, not sure because you have Ryan Tannehill now going into his second year. You know, not a great first year, but again, not many, big name guys to throw to. Now he's got at least a downfield threat. I'm not sure. It could work. I mean, I don't know. I was never a huge Mike Wallace fan. The drops killed me, but I don't know. That could be an interesting mix and match down there in Miami.
Mike Wallace, I mean no disrespect to the player. I think he's a great guy. Yeah, he committed himself to the Steelers system. But when push came to shove, and he really needed to grab a few balls to make the plays did not happen with Mike Wallace. Yes, he's speedy. Yes, he's fast. Yes, it's tough to overthrow this guy. But when you can't hold on to the ball in crucial games, and it costs the team, and you make boneheaded moves to boot, that to me, I'm kind of happy that he's gone because it's addition by subtraction with Pittsburgh right now. Miami, it might be the place for him, but I think it's significant that Miami signed him to that much money. Is it significant to the fact that they really think he's the answer? I don't know, because if he's the answer, I'd like to know what the question is.
That's a very good way to put it, and maybe we'll find out. We'll just see. But I mean, we've seen it before. Other guys leaving Pittsburgh that haven't done well in other places. And again, maybe it's a system thing. That's why I don't see Mendenhall doing much when he goes down to Arizona. That's why I don't see, again, Mike Wallace doing anything here. There's lots that are happening right now. We just got to wait and see.
Yeah. I really think it's significant that Tony Gonzalez has come back to Atlanta. I really like the Reggie Bush signing up there in Detroit.
Yeah, let's talk about Reggie Bush real quick. Yeah. I wanted to mention him. And in my mind, besides the Wes Welker free agency move, I think this is the move that makes the most sense. Detroit had a guy by the name of Joique Bell, a no-name guy out of a no-name Wright State College there in Michigan, a D3 school, and he's getting 8 catches per game out of the backfield. Now you're bringing in Reggie Bush, probably the best pass-catching running back, or definitely the most talented, I would say, at the very least, in the history of the game of football. I mean, talk about a match made in heaven. I really like what Detroit has gotten there. I think that you're going to see great things out of Reggie Bush because I know that you always like talking about it, but his running ability is extremely overrated or underrated as well.
Well, you see, this is what's happened here. When Reggie Bush was at USC, he was the next best thing to sliced bread. Okay, I mean, this guy was just, oh my God, he's the next coming. He's wonderful. He's great, you know. And then when he ended up with the Saints, he couldn't figure it out. And I mean, he was the first to admit, hey, this is a little bit different. They're playing faster. It's a lot more difficult schemes. He was okay, but he wasn't great. And everybody wanted to see that burst of greatness. Everybody wanted to see him slice through those defenses the way he ran when he was at USC. And it didn't happen. So he goes to Miami. And he started to mature, and he started to grow up. Right now, what we are seeing right now is a late bloomer. When I say a late bloomer, this is a guy who we're going to see a second resurgence. He's going to become one of the all-time great running backs out there. He's going to become one of the all-time great pass-catching running backs out there. He's creating a niche for himself, and he's in with the right system. And when I say he's in with the right system, this is a team that can mix it up, and they've got the receivers that they need out there. They got Megatron out there. They need help in that backfield. They need a power back, but they need somebody with big, soft hands that can act like a tight end, and that's who they've got. And this is a guy that's like a combination between a Wes Welker and a combination of, I dare to say this, but a Jerome Bettis type character. He's got nifty feet. He can shift while he runs. And the only person that I can see that shifted gears like that while he ran and had nifty feet was Jerome Bettis. This is a guy very much like Jerome Bettis, but with pass-catching ability like a Wes Welker.
And that's a very scary combination, to say the very least. And I think that we're going to see great things out of Reggie Bush. The Motor City should be excited about this pickup. I mean, all my Detroit native fans are very excited about it, and I just hope that if their defense shapes up a little bit too, Detroit is a playoff team in my mind just because of adding Reggie Bush. You're right. He had a coming out party this past year. You know, the league had forgotten about him, and, you know, not terribly surprising because, yeah, the system didn't work very well in New Orleans, and things were kind of shaky out there, but then you forget about him. He goes down to Miami. All of a sudden, he's got a couple 100-yard games under his belt. What do you know? Now he's on a team with the system that works well. The sky's the limit right now for Reggie Bush. And guess what? He's only 28. Yes, I know that 30 is old for a running back, but he's not. Put it this way: 30 is old for a running back because they're pounding it up the middle and they're getting plowed over all the time. Reggie Bush is not that type of running back. He's going to have a little bit longer of a shelf life as a result.
Yeah, that and also the fact that he's away from Kim Kardashian, everything will be fine.
Oh, you had to bring up the Kardashians.
You know what? That was a major distraction for him when he was in New Orleans. No doubt about it.
But you still had to bring it up. I don't know, Greg. But no, you're right. I guess whatever. And Tony Romo didn't have any problems with Jessica Simpson, right? Let me ask, how do you feel about him being re-signed at Dallas?
I like that. As much as I criticize Tony Romo, he is, statistically, he is the anti-Flacco. If you have a yin and yang, you've got Tony Romo as the black end, or the black end, whatever they call those, and Joe Flacco as the white. They're complete opposites of each other. Joe Flacco sucks during the regular season, but when he gets to the playoffs, he wins. Tony Romo is terrific during the regular season, but he can't win a playoff game. But when you look at the stats, and you take a look at his body of work, Tony Romo will get it together. Once again, I think he's a guy who's like a late bloomer. And it will happen, and under the right system, provided that Jerry Jones allows the right coach to make this team happen.
He needs to work the GM's job and realize that a quarterback can't do much if he has to be running around and being flat on his back all the time because he has a terrible offensive line.
I mean, when they got rid of Flozell Adams and he came to Pittsburgh, I was in Pittsburgh, made that run to the Super Bowl when they had Hotel Flozell.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say that Flozell Adams was big and slow, but you know what? He was a space invader. He was a guy that stopped that gap and stopped that rush and allowed that quarterback that extra second and a half to 2 seconds to make the play. And that's what helped Roethlisberger when Flozell Adams was in Pittsburgh. Dallas desperately needs an offensive line. You take Tony Romo and you give him Pittsburgh's patchwork offensive line, Tony Romo would be as good as Ben Roethlisberger.
Took the words out of my mouth. Exactly the way I feel as well. And, again, same thing. I think you and I are kind of in the minority with this one. But, people saying that you can't believe that you re-signed Tony Romo for that much money. I guess he's actually making more money this year than Joe Flacco is, which is
Who else is
very
out there?
comical.
Who else
Exactly.
is out there? Alex Smith? You know what? I still take Tony Romo, even though Alex Smith had a decent body of work. Jason Gamble? No. Let's see, who
Carson Palmer?
No.
Carson Palmer going to Arizona?
No. Carson Palmer's lucky to have a job right now. He really is.
Yeah. I like Carson Palmer, but I would take Tony Romo over him in a heartbeat.
I don't mean this disparagingly, that he's lucky to have a job. It's just that his year in Oakland wasn't the best. Everybody was anticipating him catching on pretty quickly, and it took him 2-3 games to catch on. Of course, who did he have to throw to? He really didn't have any receivers to throw to. All he had was Brandon Myers, his tight end out there, which he made him a household word. And, of course, New York said, hey, we want him. And they got him, obviously. But we'll see what happens. I wish Carson Palmer the best, but Carson Palmer has not been the same since Kimo von Oelhoffen rolled into him when Pittsburgh marched their way to their Super Bowl when they won in Detroit.
Now, Greg, there's one thing that I think that we've said pretty much about every single major free agency move so far, and whether it would work. We've said pretty much 2 words: system and surrounding cast. So who's around them that's going to make them better, and does it fit the system to begin with? And honestly, I can't believe how much of a deal the system itself is. We've talked about it, especially with the Wes Welker type things. We've now mentioned Reggie Bush. We've mentioned it with even Tony Romo, Carson Palmer here. Why is it that we're getting so many players that have to fit just a specific system in order to be successful in the NFL?
With all the parity that's happening in the league, you can arguably say you have 2 players who have 2 equal skill sets. It actually comes down to who fits the right system. Who's going to be their player that's going to step up and be the leader of the locker room, and who's going to be the truculent one that's going to sit there and pout. And perfect example, when Pittsburgh rid themselves of Mike Wallace and Rashard Mendenhall, it was addition by subtraction. Rashard Mendenhall, if you could keep him off Twitter, my God, we needed to do that. Okay? He would say some of the dumbest and the stupidest things on Twitter. All right, I don't care if it's what you believe. Okay, fine. That's what your heart of hearts say. That's beautiful. But you're a football player first. And he ended up polarizing himself and actually taking his mind off the game, and he really was not fitting into the system. Yet he was, the starting running back. Mike Wallace, same type of situation with all the drop balls. Fast, yes, very fast, but did not fit the system.
I don't think either guy ever fit the system, Greg, and that's why I think you've now seen the Steelers finally part ways, realizing that.
Right, and who has Pittsburgh picked up? Nobody yet. And why? Because Pittsburgh creates their own system. They don't want to take somebody's cast off that might not work that particular system. Now, occasionally they will. Jerome Bettis was one of those players that they picked up, they took a risk on, because Jerome Bettis had a blue-collar work ethic that Pittsburgh was looking for.
And he was still young, too.
And he was still young at that particular time, yeah. But right now, there are very few players out there that kind of fit that particular role. Now, I don't want this to be a Pittsburgh show, because let's take a look at teams like, let's talk about system. We're talking about Reggie Bush going up to Detroit. Perfect system player for Detroit. Fits right into the mold. Wes Welker, perfect system player for Denver. Fits right into the mold. And that's what teams are looking for. They're looking for people that have similar skill sets that can actually excel and be part of that particular system. It's all part of that team process. We're taking the I out of the word team.
Exactly. Now, last question here before we sign off for an evening. Going along with the system idea, we now are getting more and more teams that are going to the spread option look. We've seen guys who really have been thrown under the bus before in terms of NFL careers, guys like Dennis Dixon, who now have a chance to possibly return to the spotlight, even if it's just as a backup quarterback. Dennis Dixon heading to Philadelphia, reuniting with Chip Kelly out there. Excuse me. You also had Pat White, who was drafted as a Wildcat quarterback for Miami, who just came pretty much out of retirement. He wasn't even in the league anymore and was signed by Washington. Do you see more teams that are going to go and make these signings with a backup quarterback who can run the spread option, especially if your starter is going to run the spread option? Or is it going to be better for, say, the Redskins with RG3 to keep someone like a Kirk Cousins, a completely different system, as your backup?
Yeah, that whole thing with Kirk Cousins has really perplexed me because, you have two diametrically different quarterbacks. I see more teams basically trying to find the players that fit the system that they're trying to do. That's one of the reasons why Pittsburgh held on to Charlie Batch for so long, because he knew the system. He knew what to do. And the trouble was, Charlie Batch hadn't thrown a pass in almost 2.5 years, and whenever he was forced into action in Cleveland, he really looked bad. With all that type of thing said, yeah, that's why Pat White, made the move that he did. That's why you see teams like Buffalo, scrambling after somebody like Kevin Kolb, because he fits that West Coast system that they have, to a T. So they can develop somebody like a Nassab person, a Brian Nassab, out of Syracuse, that can possibly fit that mold out there. But there's right now there aren't a lot of good quarterbacks coming out of the draft. This draft is probably the worst for quarterbacks in probably about 20 years. So with that said, yeah, anybody that has some system play, let's bring them in, because right now the quarterback's not going to be the primary position. There's going to be other people that are going to be playing supporting roles, and we're going to see more of a cohesive team concept, I believe, this year than any time else that we've had in the NFL. I think gone are those days of that dominant quarterback and sort of a lackluster team. You're going to see a more complete team, I think, out of all the teams in the league now.
Exactly. Fitzpatrick going to Tennessee probably as the backup. Tavares Jackson going to Buffalo. He'll definitely be the backup behind Cobb. Campbell to Cleveland. Garrard to the Jets. Matt Castle to Minnesota. That's 5 quarterbacks right there who have started games, significant games in their NFL career, going somewhere new to be the backup. That's very unique right now in the
Frank
NFL.
Reich effect. You remember Frank Reich? This is going back to the days of Jim Kelly. Frank Reich was your system quarterback. This is a guy who, when Jim Kelly ended up breaking a leg or throwing his arm out or doing something horrible to his body, Frank Reich stepped up and carried the Buffalo Bills to 4 Super Bowl losses. But he got them to the big dance, and that's the most important thing. And that made Buffalo a complete team, because they knew that they could depend upon Frank Reich to get them there. The Charlie Batch type situation, same type of thing. Nothing fancy. This is a guy that failed as a starter at one period of time in his life, but is a true role player, fits the system, fits the team. And, Fitzpatrick fits the mold perfectly. Matt Castle fits the mold perfectly. These are really solid players that will propel a team to greater heights. No doubt about it.
And there are many out there still who I think will do that exact thing, but have not been picked up yet. Guys like, like we mentioned, Dallas Clark. Guys like even maybe the possibility of Randy Moss coming back, Braylon Edwards.
You know what? Let's talk a little bit about
Brandon Lloyd. I mean, there's a million of them out there. Look at the running backs who are still available out there. Brandon Jacobs. You mentioned Michael Turner, Beanie Wells, Bradshaw, Cedric Benson, Felix Jones. Lots of big names out there that could Go and make a splash somewhere new.
And this goes back to an argument that I had with Ryan Alessio and Ellis Kojo on WBBW, where they stated that a team cannot make it to the Super Bowl without having a star quarterback. And they stated, well, first of all, what about Brad Johnson, who took the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the NFL Super Bowl? What about the guy that won the Super Bowl for the Washington Redskins back, what was his name? Black quarterback, the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. And forgive me, I'm losing track.
But that's the thing. He's not memorable enough.
He's not memorable enough, but
because you can't remember Doug Williams' name.
Doug Williams was a stellar quarterback for the Washington Redskins. Took them to a Super Bowl. First black quarterback to win a Super Bowl. But was he a great quarterback? No, he was a good quarterback, an okay quarterback. How about Matt Hasselbeck when he took the Seattle Seahawks to the Super Bowl? Yeah, okay, you can argue he's a Pro Bowl player, but Matt Hasselbeck versus Tom Brady, Matt Hasselbeck versus Peyton Manning, no. He's not that elite type of quarterback. And, and my point when I was making this particular argument to Ryan and Ellis was the fact that Cleveland fans, you don't need to get another quarterback. You have a decent quarterback in Brandon Weeden. Fix your offensive line. Get yourself a possession receiver. Get yourself a scat back, and you've got yourself something to work with.
You can put Peyton Manning out there, but if he doesn't have a star receiver and a good offensive line to block for him, you can't do it. And that's why free agency is so big. That's why the draft is so big. And that's why we're here to help dissect all of that for you.
On that note, we'll call it a day.